This class is dedicated to Leil Nishmas Hatamim, Shneur Zalman ben Yibadel Chaim Tovim, Avaruchim, Menachem Mendel. This is class number 4 of the series Eating Out Without a Doubt. Last week we discussed crucial qualifications that are necessary for a Mashgiach in order for him to properly do his job and to be on top of what needs to happen. We also discussed some things which can go wrong if the Mashgiach isn't properly alert or isn't properly trained or properly educated. And we stopped midpoint, so we're going to continue on that. A few more things, examples of things that can go wrong if the Mashgiach is not on top of his game, even if he's present, even if he's there, if he's not alert and he's not properly educated, things that can go wrong. One thing which we forgot to mention last week, which I feel is important, is the Mashgiach's age. And like we discussed, it's very important for Mashgiach to be able to confront, and if a situation comes up, be able to stop things, and even if it's a lot of pressure, even if it feels very uncomfortable, even if it means he has to face the owner, and possibly maybe be scared that he may lose his job. So that's why it's important as well for Mashgiach to be age old enough that he could actually do that. Sometimes the younger Mashgiach won't be able to speak up, won't feel comfortable to speak up, will be quiet. So age as well, Mashgiach definitely shouldn't be a young, there's no set age, but definitely under 18 is not something that would be relevant. And even over 18, it's only someone who really is well established and would be able to step up and confront when needed. So that was one thing which we didn't mention. I believe we didn't mention it, so I just wanted to mention that. So continuing on the possibilities of things that can happen which can cause serious issues, even if everything coming into the restaurant was 100% kosher, the best hashgacha, the best pizza possible, but just because due to the Mashgiach's lack of control or awareness, things can go wrong. So we left off, we were discussing basar shenis alim, situations where meat, if it wasn't watched properly or overseen properly, the meat could become forbidden. Some classic examples that we brought is if the Mashgiach stepped out, for whatever reason, if it was something he had important phone call to make, and he was out long enough that the meat was open without anybody Jewish there, that could possibly be an issue of the meat if it was around non-Jewish people and there's no from people around. Another scenario would be many times restaurants at night will leave meat to defrost overnight, and some packages may be already opened. If the package is still in the original sealed packaging, that's a seal, and that's enough to know that nothing was tampered with. But sometimes the meat was already opened and let's say cut into specific shapes or ground or made into burgers, and they're not just defrosting it now. The thing which Mashgiach has to look out for before he leaves is whatever is being defrosted that night. If they were already opened, he should seal it with the kashrus tape and the signature to make sure there's two simanim that in the morning we know that this meat was kept in a situation where it was always under a seal. And if for whatever reason the Mashgiach doesn't do that and the place has a cleaning crew that comes at night or a cleaning crew that stays later after hours to clean up, that meat would be problematic because it was many hours without any sign, without any siman, and that's another scenario. In addition, if the fridges and freezers which have meat in it which can be open are left the way they are and the Mashgiach leaves and there's a cleaning crew that stays afterwards, that as well would be an issue. So if there is a cleaning crew that stays after the Mashgiach's leaving, or any worker staying after the Mashgiach's leaving, there has to be a system in place to lock, that all the fridges have a lock and all the freezers have a lock, and only the Mashgiach has the key to it. Anything left outside of the fridges and freezers should be sealed with tape, and everything has to be properly looked out for and thought of. And obviously, a good hashgacha generally will have all these protocols in place, so the Mashgiach doesn't have to come up with all these ideas himself, but he has to be able to properly enforce all this and be on top of it. Now, The next thing, which we mentioned very briefly, was bug checking, which many restaurants will have that, and there can be sometimes big quantities of lettuce, of herbs, or other things that need to be checked. The mashgiach has to be highly qualified and trained, which we had a whole series on bug training, and whoever watched those classes and was participating in those classes knows the intricacies and importance of really being trained properly, and all the more so when you're doing big quantities and there's pressure to produce and to come out with clean produce. So mashgiach really needs to have been trained properly. And a basic question, even that a mashgiach can be asked, is, what procedure do you do? Do you use the shmatz method? Do you do a chazaka? Do you check leaf by leaf? And simple questions like, how often do you see bugs? And were you trained by an expert to detect bugs? Just after asking a few questions, you can see if you feel comfortable with the mashgiach's knowledge and training in bug checking, and if not, then avoid the leafy green to that location, because it happens even in the best hashgachas that something falls between the cracks, and a mashgiach, for whatever reason, was not trained the way he should have been, and therefore it's something to definitely be wary of, especially with the importance of Digas Salayim, like we spoke in the classes, that even one bug could be up to 4, 5, or 6 lavim deraisa. In addition is tight control on kelim, on equipment. Mashgiach should be familiar with the equipment, so that if something comes in and for whatever reason was not passed by him, he could notice suddenly there's something new here. What's going on? Was this brought brand new? Was this taivold? Is it bought used? It needs to be kashered. All that is something the mashgiach needs to be on top of, and especially when it comes to knives of chefs. Chefs tend to have their knives that they feel very personally connected to, and those knives have been with them for years, and the hand fits the knife perfectly, and sometimes even have knives that are a few $100s custom made to fit their hand exactly, and they want to use that knife, especially when it comes to delicate things like sushi or other areas in the kitchen that need more of a specific knife. And the chef will bring in their backpack, will bring their knives, and as soon as the mashgiach turns his head around, they just pull out their knives and start using it. And mashgiach's not aware of what knives are in the kitchen, what knives are not, he won't even be able to pick that up. And it's something which happens many times, and I've heard from mashgiachim many times that one of their biggest struggles was this: the knives are always, new knives are popping up, and chefs were claiming they were always around, and they really couldn't know. So the mashgiach has to figure out a system that he could really be on top of that and figure that out. As well, sometimes knives are sent out to be sharp. After time, they get dull. In the kitchen that's fast-moving, we need sharp knives. But if the knives are sent out to a non-kosher place to be sharpened, they would have to be kosher before coming back, because over there, they're sometimes washed together with other treif knives in a dishwasher, or sometimes they even switch to by mistake. They just send you a similar knife back. So knife sharpening as well, mashgiach has to be on top of it. It's going to a kosher place, and if not, make sure before they come back that they're koshered. And the list could go on of things that the mashgiach should look out for to make sure no kelim which are not kosher or which were not toivold enter the kitchen. As well as after hours, if there's a cleaning crew after hours, you have all the equipment in the kitchen and no one's watching it, and if a worker wants to warm up his dinner, he could pop it into the microwave and put a tray of dinner in the microwave and chase up the microwave. Or if they want to turn on the oven or do something, who knows what they can do. That equipment has to be secured, and the system that many hashgachas will use, they'll have a special gas lock which locks all the gas, so anything which is gas powered will be turned off by the mashgiach before he leaves with the lock system, and anything which is electric will have something called a plug lock. It's a lock that goes in the plug, so the microwave or anything electric that could cook or that could warm up will be locked up, so that if a cleaning crew needs to stay after hours, they can't use any of the equipment, they can't access the fridges, and whatever's left out is sealed. So a very good question that could be asked to a mashgiach is, what's the process? Are you the last one out? Is there a cleaning crew that comes in after hours? How do you secure the meats and the fridges or the equipment? Is there a type of lock, a gas lock? These are all questions that could be brought up to make sure that there's actually a proper system in place. It could be that hashgacha doesn't even know that there's a cleaning crew that's coming after hours, and the mashgiach is the one that should have been aware of that. The hashgacha thought that the mashgiach was the last one out, and now he's not, and there's a clean crew coming, and no one's really making sure that things are locked up properly. So equipment as well is something very important, which needs to be overseen and be under tight control by the mashgiach. Obviously, if there's any wine, it could just be missing one bottle, or misreading, or not seeing one thing properly. Sometimes wines can be similar, or wine can be non-mavushal, and the moment it's open and handled by a non-Yehudi or non-Jew, or even someone who's not Shem Shabbos, it's a problem of the wine becoming now stam yinam and it's usur. So that as well is important to pay attention to details for mashgiach. And that's another thing. Hafresh challah. There could be things that they make in the kitchen, in-house, even if it's cakes or cookies, even liquidy batter cakes. All these things need hafresh challah. People think sometimes it's just for challah, any hafresh challah, or just for bread. But the truth is, even for cookies and even for cakes that have a liquidy batter, there is an obligation of separating challah. Just by a liquidy batter, the obligation only begins once the cake is baked, and you could actually separate a piece, because otherwise when it's liquid, you can't really separate it. It's liquid. But so the mashgiach could be asked, is there anything that's baked in-house? Who separates the challah? How often does the challah separation happen? How is the challah piece burnt? Because once you separate the piece of challah, that's not considered 100% usur, in isur, forbidden. If you put it in the oven when other things are cooking, it could affect the kashrus of the things in the oven that's being cooked with the piece of challah at the same time. If it's put on the oven rack, that spot on the oven rack becomes not kosher because it's usur. So the piece of challah as well needs to be handled properly and burnt properly. And putting it in the oven that's used for other things could be very questionable, and it could be an issue. So the hashgachas will have a system to burn the challah. And some hashgachas won't even want to deal with burning it. They just tell the mashgiach double wrap it and throw it out. So it's always a question to ask. You can ask the mashgiach, is there ever a hafresh challah? Who does it? How is the challah burnt or discarded? Just to get an image of that. In addition, and again, just to make this clarification, all these things is to make someone who wants to be extra careful, very comfortable eating somewhere. If there's a reliable hashgacha and you see the mashgiach and it looks like a erlich from yid, or usually halachically you have more than enough to rely on that things are being done properly. But if someone wants to be doing a higher standard and feel extra comfortable, if someone wants to be medactic and wants to be extra careful, doing everything and making sure that whatever they're putting in their mouth, they're being as careful as they would at home. So that's where all these questions and all this education comes in, because at times, the moment you're eating out and you're not in full control what's going on in the restaurant, and you really want to be aware of what you're putting in your mouth, these are all educational questions that you could ask and really feel comfortable with what you're actually buying and what you're actually being served. In addition, things could be 100% the best hashgacha, but unfortunately in the kitchen there was a cross-contamination. Fish and meat we know is al pi halacha cannot be mixed together due to a sakana, and if there isn't a proper system, kitchens are very messy, a lot going on. There could be a meat order and a fish order, and the same person is handling it and is using his hands or the same spatulas or the same table, and there could be an easy cross-contamination. So in kitchens with a mashgiach, there has to be very clear rules. And it's something the mashgiach needs to put his foot down, because many times these are one of the first things that kitchens fail in, is properly separating between meat and fish. So the mashgiach, a typical thing could be a set table will be designated just for fish. And when a worker is working with fish, he's not working with anything else. He has to remove his gloves or put on new gloves or wash his hands. And there is designated knives and cutting boards for fish. There's designated frying pans for fish. These are all classic things that every reliable hashgacha should have in place, but they rely on the mashgiach to enforce that. So for whatever reason, this place doesn't have a cutting board or a knife or a table designated to deal with fish, then it won't be dealt with, and there could be cross-contamination happening, which would be an issue. So there's also color coding. Every place which has a reliable hashgacha should have a specific color of things that are fish. whether it's yellow or green. They will have a color that says this is a fish knife, a fish cutting board, a fish frying pan, and these are all things which the mashgiach needs to be on top of and can be asked. How is fish and meat segregated? How do you make sure that they don't cross-contaminate? You can also ask mashgiach which foods are 100% parv that I can order with my fish. Sometimes the French fries are fried together with a schnitzel, so I can't eat fish and chips. I can't eat fish with French fries. So is the rice 100% parv? You have to, or the mashed potatoes. You need to find out from the something that's 100% parv. Obviously, it could be done in meat equipment. The kitchen is generally meat kitchen, but a mashgiach could be aware of that. If he's not aware of that, that's a problem because fish is being served. It's being served with sides. What sides are being served with? So these are all things that that a mashgiach needs to be very much on top of in the kitchen. In addition, there's the ma'achali sakana, different foods of the sakana that if they're peeled, for example, a fully peeled egg, or a fully peeled garlic, or a fully peeled onion, and the root was removed from the garlic and the onion, such a thing cannot be left overnight. And if it's left overnight, it's also you cannot eat it halachically because of a sakana, because of a danger. Now, a restaurant many times at the end of the day will have leftover chopped onions, leftover crushed garlic, leftover if it's hard-boiled eggs, whatever it is. How does the mashgiach do? Does he know? Is he aware of it? How does he deal with it? Some mashgiachos allow the mashgiach to sprinkle some salt and some oil, but there's ways to deal with it. But mashgiach could be asked, how do you deal with that? Just to, if someone wants to feel comfortable about that, and there is a system for that. Generally, again, adding some oil or some salt or some sugar or some spices when it's seasoned, that already removes the idea of a sakana. So to sum up, just some ideas or some questions, and as an educated consumer, we need to know the questions to ask to feel comfortable, and we should never be afraid or ashamed to ask, because that's a big part of a mashgiach, is that he's there to address concerns or questions from consumers. So you're not taking away from his time, you're not wasting his time, you're actually helping him do his job properly, and as long as you're asking respectfully, and it's your responsibility to really be aware and comfortable of what you're putting into your mouth. So just to give some ideas, obviously you want to ask with tact. You don't want to feel like it's interrogation. So it could just start with, oh, you're the mashgiach. Wow, that's fascinating. There must be so many details to learn about kashrut and a mashgiach. Wow, it's a busy kitchen. Wow, I mean, it's fascinating. How did you learn all that? Where did you study? Did you get trained? Did you take a course? Just to try to see what kind of information ready you get from that. And then you can just say, I just have some things I want to clarify just to be clear. And you can start, again, various questions. If it starts with bugs, like we mentioned before, what kind of training, what method do you use for bugs, how often do you find bugs? And when it comes to Bishul Yisrael, which we discussed briefly last week, how do you secure Bishul Yisrael? How do you accomplish it? Do you rely on the pilot, or do you each time turn on the fire? How about the ovens that shut off when the doors open? Is it do you have that feature overridden? And all these types of questions that could be asked. Is there for meat? How is meat kept secure? Do you lock it? How do you deal when there's a cleaning crew? How do you secure the equipment? How do you make sure the cleaning crew doesn't warm anything up? Is there a gas lock? Is there a plug lock? How do you segregate meat and fish, like we just discussed? What colors is fish equipment color coded with? And who checks the eggs? If there's a fresh challah, like we mentioned before, some questions about a fresh challah. And these are just some questions. And hopefully, towards the end of the course, maybe have all this typed up so you can have more clarity of the questions and topics to discuss. And thank you very much for joining us tonight.